Welcome to Stories with Traction, unedited and unfiltered. These are real conversations with leaders who have walked through trials and triumph. In a world of AI-polished sound bites and scripted perfection, this podcast isn't about being flawless. It's about being purposeful. I'm your host, Matt Zahn. We're going to find out what drives these leaders, what's their story, and how can we learn from their experiences. Get inspired and enjoy Stories with Traction. Mark, welcome to Stories with Traction podcast.
Hey, Matt, so happy to be here today.
I'm excited you're here and I love what you do. I want to dive right in, get to it. So Mark, when you are at a networking event or a party and someone asks you, what do you do? What's your response to that question?
Yeah, my response in the short version is I'm here to make event owners' lives easier. And the long version of that is what I do is I'm an event experience strategist. I have my roots in theater and video storytelling, right? But my goal is to be an event optimization specialist for a company. So our organization, Umbrella, we make events more memorable. And we do that by removing the stress from the business owners and planners. And we make that process of planning an event more efficient, being economical, and for the participants, more engaging.
I love that. Event experience strategist. That's fantastic. All right. Making events more memorable. So I want you to give a definition to us, right? Because I think sometimes we think in pictures. So when we think of a memorable event, our mind can go in many different directions. So what are some aspects of a memorable event to you? What does that look like to have an incredibly engaging, memorable event?
And I think you said the key word, engaging, right? I mean, it has to be something that connects with an audience member to make that stand out in the mind. One of the challenges I think we face these days is not thinking about the audience too much. I mean, we tend to focus so much on the content, and it's actually really amusing. I was just listening to an event with Monique Ruff-Bell. She's the Chief Program and Strategy Officer for TED. And she said, content is king, but experience is queen. And that's what mostly we forget about, is this idea that if the audience isn't engaged, if they aren't really listening to what's happening, they are distracted by other things that's happening, they're not going to retain the content. So you've wasted all that time and energy creating an event for nobody to take anything away, right? So I think that's one of the key things is, how do you make it more engaging for your audience? How do you work through this process of really connecting with them? And there's so many ways that you can connect with people. I think storytelling is one of those wonderful things, but it's also that human-to-human connection. So we were just talking about this a little bit right before we started, but I think the challenge is you have to set clear expectations for your audience. You have to give them a reason to be there. You have to tell them what are the consequences for being at this event, and you have to have consequences for it. So you have to have a goal to achieve something that the attendees can take away from attending. You have to have vital conversations. You need to make bold decisions, and you have to have a reason for them to attend and participate. Then they will retain the information. They have a stake in it. They've got skin in the game, right? So if they have those stakes and the results are something that include them in those conversations and they're participants and not spectators, right? Then they'll remember this. That's vital to making sure that there's a reason for them to be there.
Let's back up a moment and talk about the why of events in general,
Yeah.
right? Because everyone wants to focus on the ROI, and they're looking at cost, they're looking at what would be an investment. So what are the points to in-person events?
Why have an event in the first place? It's first and foremost, in my mind, events are a great way to connect with people in a very human and natural way. It's about building connections. It's about building relationships, if it's done right, right? And the way you fail at that is you overwhelm people, you exhaust people, you speak at them all day. When you do that, it's going to absolutely backfire, and you're better off not even having done the event in the first place, right? So you need to be very mindful about what you want to accomplish from a business standpoint and how you want the audience to change, right? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think? What do you want them to do differently after the event from when they walked in the door? And that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of planning. It's an incredibly unique and valuable skill set. So you need to start with those goals, build out your agenda from there. Don't start with the logistics. Don't start with like, too often people start with like, when am I going to have it? Where is it going to be? Who's going? How do we get people there? Not why, right? So if you don't start with why, everything's going to crumble around you.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much in what you said. So let's unpack some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the consequences. You had
Yep.
mentioned the not being spoken to all day. And one of the
So
things that
much.
I think about is in our AI world right now, and AI being even more prevalent, information is so cheap, right? We
Yeah.
all have
Yeah.
information in the palm of our hand. It's really the transformation that matters. And if someone is
Mm-hmm.
at an event and it's an experience, right? They're experiencing that event. They're taking something with them that they can apply and have transformation in their lives. So, from an ROI perspective, I just see so many businesses can utilize in-person events to
Mm-hmm.
inspire their people to take actions that they need them to take. Now, you mentioned
Yes.
a key
Yes.
point about someone being up there all day and just speaking at someone.
Yep. Yep.
How do you take an audience on a journey, if you will? Like when I think about a good movie, like it takes you on this journey. It's so engaging.
Mm-hmm.
How do you create that engagement? Is there a psychology to it that you want audiences to be standing and walking around at certain points, and you want them to be
Yeah.
listening, and you want exercises, you want keynotes, you want workshops? Like how do you set all that up?
There is so much there. So variety is the spice of life, and it's the same thing with events, right? There's this idea that there's a sweet spot out there, about 44 minutes of time, right, where you're connecting with your audience. And the way that you do that is through smaller nuggets of information or breakpoints. So currently, there's a belief that most people's attention span, given the entire range of humanity and all of the ages and so forth that are out there, but it's around under 10 minutes, right? So a good rule of thumb is every 10 minutes, you have to plan out in your agenda things that you can do to break it up and reconnect with your audience, right? So from a connection standpoint, it starts with your agenda. Look at what you can change, play a video every 10 minutes, do a poll, something that makes them turn from an attendee, a passive viewer, to an active engagement. Have them simply raise their hands. They already have their phones. Do a poll everywhere, do a Slido, do a, Mentimeter, do whatever, right? To connect with them. And then not just take that information and say, great, well, that was lovely, thank you, but react to it. Communicate with them, have conversations with your audience. If you're having a conversation based on information they've given you, they're much more connected because they feel like they have a stake in this conversation now, not just watching a movie or watching TV, right? But they're actively involved in making a decision. And that's where consequences come in. Because it's vital that your events have conversations, bold decisions are made. There's a reason for people to attend and participate. So again, if you're making the participants and not just attendees, they're sharing in the stakes of the result and they're including in that conversation, which obviously for virtual is even more important than in person because usually, cameras off, nobody sees them, and et cetera. So I went off on a tangent, but there's a lot of that there to do that. And I love connecting with the audiences. So from the standpoint of things to do, obviously work on your agenda. Don't cram too much in. I think that's my biggest suggestion is it takes an investment in time and money to have people, quote unquote, sitting around doing nothing. But that's the most important time for people to develop relationships, to find mentors and mentees, to absorb the information you just shared with them and not just have it flow in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, so let's talk about don't cram too much in because there are
Mm-hmm.
multiple ways that I'm thinking about this. One is someone is paying to go to a conference, right? They're
Sure.
investing financially in that conference.
Yeah,
Obviously, they want to walk away with tremendous value. But you're
absolutely.
right, it's interesting. My wife and I have been to multiple conferences together. We love going to conferences together. And what's interesting is you could have amazing speakers and everything like you're talking about, the experience and the journey and the connection. But it
Yep.
is amazing that we walk away and we're like, wow, we feel rested as well. Like we got a lot out of it, but there were moments where we went on a nature walk or we were able to hang out in the pool, and then we had breakouts. There was
Yes.
all this
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
So there has to be a happy medium of offering tremendous value to an audience member, but not cramming too
Mhm.
much in. What would that
Yeah.
happy medium be?
Yeah, and that's going to be unique and different for every single event, but I think it's having the respect for the audience's time and their need to recover in between. There's a whole study right now on wellness, and wellness isn't just yoga in the morning or good food. While those are important, it's about, the time it takes for people of different types. Like there's a whole study on neuroinclusivity around how people absorb information in different ways and what they need for each other, which is a whole separate conversation to have. But I think the big takeaways are: don't force things too early and don't go too late. I had a meeting recently where unfortunately they were trying to cram too much in. And so they had people arrive in the morning, and they were like, we're going to start at 1 o'clock. That's great, right? Except for the fact that people were getting up at 3 a.m. to get there on planes to show up, right? So that failed. Then, after the entire day, it was great. We were like, we'll be done at 5. And we're like, wonderful. They give them an hour. But then they had to schedule the awards gala dinner that night. So people were up at 3 a.m. They're going to bed at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. They're exhausted. And then the next morning, they're starting at 8 a.m. So start a little bit later, give people longer breaks. Usually breaks are considered like coffee and bio breaks, right? Instead of that, look at maybe doing a half-hour session where you have time for people to relax, communicate with each other, maybe throw in some sort of an activity, a fun icebreaker. Lunches tend to be 45 minutes to an hour. Make them an hour and a half, make them 2 hours. I know that sounds like it's an insane amount of time, but give them something as a structured activity. We've done sessions where during lunch, we actually have a small little expo where partners are there to talk to them. And it gives them just something different than sitting in a seat, looking forward at a screen with an audience. And then the other thing that's hardest is try to invest in having people come earlier, like come one day earlier. And instead of having a 3-day meeting, have a 4-day meeting, and then do like an afternoon team building or exercise, do a morning, something different, just to break up that time. That I think helps. The other thing is don't book 1 hour slots for yourself in your agenda, book 45-minute slots. And then that when you run late, that presenter talks too long and goes way too long, you're not, up against it for the rest one, or you're running late overall. You've got some breathing room and some buffers in between. Just a
Really
few.
good suggestions. Yeah, going too late, one of the dangers that I could see is that even if it was high value and they did everything right, if it goes too late, if people are looking at their watches thinking, when
Yeah.
will this end? Like, I feel like we've
Yeah.
kind of lost, right? We've watched movies that they're fantastic and then horrible endings, and it botches the entire movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It was like, did you just run out of money, or what happened? Like, why are you wrapping up now? And that happens every single day. And you probably experience this with coaching, presenters. But like one of the worst things I see happening is that when somebody has like an hour long talk and they try to cram in 2 hours or an hour and a half worth of information, right? So you're like, hey, you've got an hour talk. Why do you have 120 slides, right? So sometimes from the beginning that's going to happen. But one of the worst things is they get halfway and they look down at that speaker timer and they go, oh my gosh, I have 45 minutes of content. It's got 15 minutes. And they start to speak really fast and try to get through all the information. At that point, nobody understands it. You're doing a disservice to the audience and to yourself. At that point, you're better off just saying, you know what? I'm going to finish up this with this section. I'm not going to get to all of it. I'll post up my information. I'm happy to have further conversations, but really let's focus on this content and take our time through it so you truly understand it. Never happens, but I wish it did.
Yeah. I was at an event, this must be 15 years now, and I thought it was a joke. because this individual, this guy had the most amount of slides I've ever seen in a presentation. I literally thought that
Yep.
he lost a bet and he had to get up there and try to go through 100 plus slides. I didn't
Yep.
remember
Yep.
a lick of the information.
Nope.
I
Nobody
just thought
does.
this is agonizing. I cannot believe this. I'd much rather this individual have 3 slides
Right.
versus
Right.
it was wild. Yeah, so you gave us a lot of really good points. I appreciate that. I do want to backtrack a little bit, Mark. I want to dive into your story for a moment.
Sure.
So not to go back to the beginning, I really like starting with the teen years. I think those are years that really mold us
I'm
into the
happy to
adults we
talk teen
are.
years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if we were to go back to you as a teen, let's say 13 years old, and I were to
Yep.
ask
Yep. Yep.
Mark as a 13-year-old what he wanted to do, what he wanted to be, what response would I have gotten in return?
I'm very lucky. I've known since I was a kid I wanted to do events. Like I knew I wanted to be on stage doing theater or, and back in 13, right? So I was very lucky. My parents were librarians at a private school. I grew up in Hawaii, right? They had moved there. We were faculty brats, but I got to live that life. So I was on stage, doing everything. My dad, for the high school side of things, had me in doing all the AV for all the dances, setting up for all the plays and the performances, starting in middle school. My mom was, lower and middle school librarian, right? So I was roped into all of these things. In high school, I was in every single club. I was in yearbook, I was in choir, I was in theater, I was in AV club, I was shooting all the football games. Like any club activity that needed to be coordinated, I was there. So for a while, I really wanted to be an actor, right? But and that's why I went to Northwestern, But I discovered that I was actually better and enjoyed a lot more the planning and directing of the shows and doing the filming and editing of the videos because it allowed me to craft the story, right? We're talking about stories, right? Like I love to craft the audience experience, and you do that through the story that you're telling. And you can have a much greater impact on the audience if you're directing than if you are on stage. It also had a lovely benefit because as a director or working in corporate, I could actually pay rent and eat versus being an actor, right? So it gave me a way to kind of move forward. So yeah, I was. My mom worked in a professional theater for fun. She was building sets and doing lighting and all that stuff. So I grew up on the stage, right? And I grew up, working on coordination. So I love that part of it, and
Wow.
that played through into college as well.
Yeah. All right. So you were you born and raised in Hawaii?
I was. My parents had moved there just before I was born.
Okay.
They were gypsies. They loved traveling. I have these great pictures of them, like driving this old Land Rover, the first car I learned to drive around Africa, like all over the place. They'd been everywhere. And they were actually, I believe, on their way to Australia when they sidetracked off to Hawaii briefly and fell in love with the place. They found jobs and they stayed. So my sister and I grew up there, and then we still had family everywhere on the mainland. So it wasn't like I was not over here a lot, but it was wonderful to grow up there because it's such a unique environment. Everyone thinks paradise or growing up in grass huts, but like it was one of the most diverse places in the world. I had friends from all over the world. This private school that my parents taught at had people that were like from everywhere in the world. So I grew up with people that spoke different languages, had different cultures, and it really allowed me to fall in love with, travel and events.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just envisioning you being able to connect with people in different walks of life.
Yep.
Did you take that into what you do with event planning now, especially
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
conferences that people might be coming in from
Yeah.
all over the world? Is that part of the planning? Is how do we make sure that we are connecting with different cultures present
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
in this room?
Yeah, localization and respect for culture. Yeah, it absolutely did. Because again, I had friends that it was not weird for me that they looked different than me, that they spoke different than I did, that they were from a different place, right? It was just normal, right? So when I travel the world, which I'm lucky enough to do, I love the idea of being able to like just hop in and have a conversation with anybody, try something different, go somewhere else. And that plays through to events. I was listening to oh my gosh, what was his name? Drew Binsky. He's one of the guys who's traveled to 197 countries. And I listened to him recently talk about this idea of getting outside your comfort zone, trying new things. One of the things he told us a story was, he would go to some place and he would randomly, talk to like the bellhop that he met at there. And he would say, what are you doing for the rest of the day? Let's go out, show me your town, right? And just having those conversations. And you have to do that with events too, because you really need to have this connection with everybody. Everyone is so different, and their cultures are so different. You have to talk to them, listen to them, start to think about what makes sense for them. We can't just put our mindset and our culture and overlay that to something that'll work for everybody. So yeah, it definitely plays into the event world that I'm in, because most of our events are overseas. Like I think like at least 80% of our events are in Europe these days, and they're bringing in people from all over the world.
Wow. I was laughing when you were saying that because I was thinking back to a story many years ago. I went to a section in Mexico, and before going, I was doing all the research, right? Here are the places to check
Yep.
out. Here are the restaurants. Here are this. And when I got there and I was speaking to the locals, they're like, don't do any of that.
No, those
Let
are
us
tourist
show
traps.
you.
Don't
Yeah,
even do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing that we can, we can pop something into a chat GPT, or we can go on Google, or we can, look at certain blogs, and then we actually talk to the locals, and they have the spots that we should be going
Yes,
to,
yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I was just in Athens about a month or so ago for a site survey, and there was nothing around, on Google that was like a well-known restaurant. You have to take a taxi to get there, whatever, and that wasn't our gig. So me and one of our other producers, we found a random place. We walked over to it. It was this tiny, like it's the size of my office, right? So there was like 3 tables in there. Costas was the owner and cook. He cooked in a space the size of my desk, right? And we had the most amazing conversations and the most amazing food, and it was authentic and it was real, and it wasn't something that was fancy or Americanized. It was an incredible experience. And that's something that most people miss out on, is having those authentic experiences of, mostly it's either not knowing or fear, but just get over that and try to experience, what it's like for somebody who's living there. And to your point, ask somebody where their favorite place is. I do that all the time. Like, where's your favorite place to eat? What would you order? Surprise me. Like, just try something that I'm never going to had. And, what do you love to eat? Feed it to me.
I love that. I also love travel, so I'm interested to get your perspective on this. So when we think of international travel,
Yeah.
what are some places that you would say like people have to go to before they die? It could be in Europe, it could be in Africa, wherever, but
Yeah.
what would be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some of the few that you would say you have to check this place out?
Sure. I have so many popping through my mind. So I'm going to kind of go continent to continent here a little bit. Um, uh, Istanbul. Right now, that may not be the place that everyone wants to go, but definitely go visit Istanbul, and get out of the city and get into the outside outskirts of Turkey. I was lucky enough to have one of my cousins who was living in England get married just outside of Istanbul. And so we went back there last year, but I've been there several times. Love it. South Africa is a great place to go visit. New Zealand, Australia, definitely key places that you have to visit as well. I hate to say this out loud because I don't want people to go there, but Antarctica is like a bucket place that you should go. We were lucky enough to shoot video, and I spent an overnight on an ice field in a shallow grave that I dug for myself, and to shoot penguins and seals for video, and whales, kayak through the icebergs. I mean, it is an incredible experience. If you can't do Antarctica, do Alaska, right? Experience something that's different from where you are. Boy, so many places in the world to go to these days.
I was mentioning to you that I do my best to do a week trip with my wife, just the two of us, no kids. And one of the best trips we've been on in the US was Alaska. We did an
Yeah,
incredible
I
trip
love it.
there. Absolutely stunningly beautiful. So outside of Alaska, you'd mentioned Hawaii. What are some other
Sure.
places in
Yep.
the US that you'd recommend people go to?
Amusingly, actually, my wife and business partner is heading out with a friend of hers to go to Death Valley to see the spring bloom. Like there's a once in a decade bloom that's coming out. So there's places throughout. Again, Alaska is kind of high up on my list. I love it. But like we shot a video back in college in the Badlands of South Dakota. Right? There's so many incredible locations. I think you could take a dart and throw it at the United States. And as long as you don't go to like the main city and just stay there and you go out into someplace else, or you find like an amazing place in the country to go to and meet people and talk to them, you can absolutely do that. Again, fond memories of everywhere. New Orleans, right? Phenomenal place. Just got back from New York. Incredible, right? But I tend to like to go out into the areas that nobody knows and experiences. We have a sailboat. We have moved it from Chicago, where we're based, up into northern Green Bay because we want to get out to where there's nobody at and find places that have a perspective that nobody ever sees, right? So find areas that are out in the middle of nowhere. Pacific Northwest, love whitewater rafting in Oregon. Great thing you should do. The dunes on the coast of Oregon, phenomenal. I could pick any state and give you like, a recommendation.
Yeah. I was blown away by South Dakota and Oregon as well, right? You're
Yeah.
right. There's so many incredible places. I do want to talk about location as it pertains to these meetings. So we were
Yeah.
talking about ROI, obviously this is an investment for businesses to
Yeah.
have these
Yeah.
conferences, but we're also talking about the experience. And I do think location does create an experience, right? My wife goes to probably more conferences than even I do. And one of the things that's kind of a drawback is if it's a conference that takes place annually and it's the same
Every time.
city every single year. So if someone's like game planning, having this in-person event, what do you recommend from an experience perspective? Because you mentioned sometimes you got to get outside the city to experience it. Where do you go as it pertains to location?
Yeah. So one of the things that I am pushing very hard for our clients to consider is not going to quote unquote top tier cities that everyone's been to 1,000 times. Like I kid you not, in the last 3 years, I think I did 20 events in Barcelona, right? And it's just too much. And mostly it's for the same set of clients. So they've all been there at the same time. Everyone's been to Paris, everyone's been to London, everyone's been to Rome, everyone's been, and what I'm strongly recommending and I'm researching and trying to promote is find some place that's a little outside the norm. And then the most important thing is definitely budget time so that people can experience that city, right? Like we talked about this before, like find a half day that they can go out and do a team building activity, find a half day where they can go do something that is involving the local culture, have an offsite dinner. And one of the advantages of going with a, city that is less known is that it tends to be more affordable, right? So from an ROI standpoint, you can take your exact same budget and say, hey, if I've got X, and it costs me half of that to do the meeting I normally do, put that money back in as an investment to your audience. Put that investment back into your people and give them the ability to explore that. It will become so much more memorable to them than if you do what we all normally do, sadly, for events, is we fly into an airport, we get in a taxi, we go to a hotel, we are stuck in a ballroom all day long for 3 days, and maybe we get out for an offsite if we're lucky, but most of the time we're stuck in that hotel. Then we get back in a taxi, we're back in an airplane, and we fly home. And we've never experienced the culture, the vibrancy, the people of that country you go to. So I think we are underutilizing all of these wonderful meetings that we're having around the world because we don't let our people breathe and experience what it's like to be there. And that's a huge problem in my mind.
Yeah, when we're talking about transformation, location is so important because we remember through different locations. So if we've been in, a major car accident, we could tell you exactly where that took
100%.
place, right?
100%.
Most of us know where we were when we learned about 9/11, right? There are different events, different big events that happen in our life. We could tell you exactly where we were, how we were feeling, what we were experiencing, and not to pick on like Las Vegas, but there's a lot of conferences that take place in Las Vegas. Most people that are listening to this, if they go to conferences, they've probably been to Vegas many, many times. But it's those other areas that are so unique that there's more of like a stickiness with even the information, because then you start saying, oh, remember when we went to blank. We've never been there before. We're experiencing it for the first time. So there has to be some psychology in that as well.
100%. Yeah. So content is tied to memory. Memory is usually visual for me, at least, and for a lot of people, right? So, if you, this is amusing. I was actually recently listening to somebody who is a learning scientist, and she's absolutely amazing. Her name's Lauren Waldman. And this is an example that I've heard multiple times, but it was wonderful because there's a science to how long you can actually, and I'm paraphrasing, but like, if it's a transitory memory, it's like 15 seconds, like something's in and it's gone. And you can reinforce that longer with repetition. And the more you repeat it, the longer it will hold, but it's still not very long. But there are certain other great things that you can do to tie into your memory. And for me, one of the things that works is to create a visual image. So she threw up like 8 words up on the screen. For, I don't know, maybe it was like 10 seconds, right? And she said, memorize these. And before, I'd have no hope. Like I'd remember maybe the first one, which was zebra, right? And the nice thing is that we can train ourselves through memories and visuals and locations. So now the words I can literally remember, because I created this picture in my mind, was of a zebra pulling a cart with a canoe in it, wearing a bandana and sunglasses, eating a sandwich. And those were all the words, right? So now I can do that. And memory in an event is exactly the same way. Those memorable moments tie you to the content and the people you met. So if we're not actually creating memorable moments because we're in a generic ballroom someplace and we're not doing experiential, we're not creating a visual look and feel with beautiful graphics and video and lighting and audio and things that create those memorable moments, it's not memorable. So therefore it goes away and it's gone within 15 seconds, right? So I think the location is key to this, because as you said, when we talk about events, we're like, oh, remember that event that we did the launch in Rome, right? Then everybody immediately remembers the beautiful like graphics that were designed of the flowers, and there was a sunflower side of things, and we met these great people, and then we had this wonderful dinner, and like it all flows back from our memories. But if it's like, you remember that white ballroom with the chairs? Nobody's going to remember any of that, right? So yes, yeah, I agree with you 1,000%. We need to find memorable locations and memorable moments to make any of this worthwhile.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. I got a lot out of it. You gave us a lot of nuggets. There are 3 things in particular that I'm going to take as major takeaways. The first thing you said, Mark, is content is king, but experience is queen. I think that's really important for everyone to remember is, yes, we need to have great content, but we also need to focus on the experience. The second thing that you said that really stuck with me is you have to share the consequences for not being at the event. Yeah. I think in this hybrid work environment that we're in, there's so many people that will tell me, oh, I can't be there in person, but can you just record it and send it to me? And they're just not going to get the experience. Nope. It's not going to be transformational. So that's so important to share the consequences of what they're missing out on by not being there. We have to get people to those events. And then the third and final thing that you said that I think everyone needs to think more about is you'd mentioned every 10 minutes, like people's attention spans kind of top out. So every 10 minutes you need to be doing something, whether it's a video or a poll or raising the audience members' hands, and you need to be engaging with your audience to take them on that journey. So I really appreciate that. Mark, if anyone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for your services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
Absolutely. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Visit Brella.com. That's our website. It's got links to all my webinars, podcasts, thoughts, but more importantly, email me. Just email me at mark@brella.com. I love to communicate about this. As you can tell, there's a passion for storytelling and communicating. And the more I can talk with people and help them to understand what we're trying to accomplish, at Brella, and more importantly, what they can do on their own, is golden. I love it.
Perfect. I'll include all that in the show notes. People can just click and go from there. Thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate your time today.
Matt, I appreciate you as well. And I hope all the audience members got something amazing out of this.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please leave a review, since positive reviews help others find these conversations. New episodes drop regularly, so stay tuned. And remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to take action, you must share more stories.